Welcome back to the All Things Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Julian. I am here. I'm back. We haven't recorded a nice episode in a good month or so. It's been some time. We've taken some time off. EP will not join us tonight. Kev will not join us. Maybe Kev joins us in a little bit, but for now, it's just me tonight. I'm excited to be back with you guys. It's been some time, and there's been a lot of things that went down in the football world specifically. Obviously, baseball season is taking off. We got things like the Bristol Speedway Classic that was really, I guess, a polarizing event, but something to talk about as far as reviews and what feedback we've gotten from there. But a stunning sight nonetheless. And big news out the WNBA with some injury. And so we're going to get into all of that. Luka Doncic signing 3 years, 165 with the Lakers was another big thing. But I guess where I wanted to start was as I ease back into this, get into some headlines with you guys, because I was watching the New York Liberty game the other night when they were playing Connecticut for the second time. They lost to them on Friday night, and then went out and had a great game on Sunday. Sabrina had 20 in the first half. She had like 16 in the first quarter. And so, she's continuing to do her thing. So, but in the Aces versus the Minnesota Lynx game, we saw WNBA, maybe MVP frontrunner, Defensive Player of the Year candidate, Nafisa Collier, sustain an ankle injury in a questionable situation because they were winning by 43 points. And, you figure you don't necessarily need your star, best player, arguably best player in the league out there at that moment. However, Coach, she didn't think the game was over at that point. And so while I respect a coaching decision in the sense of competition and, just getting your players the minutes they earn and having her do her job, but there should be some context. There should be some discretion when you're up. You guys won the game 111-58. And so, in my opinion, Nafisa Collier didn't really have business being out there. Again, I'm not the coach, so I do respect the decision in the winning aspect, competition aspect, but you also do got to protect your players as well and trust your other, players. Like your bench should be able to come in there in a 40-point route and at least hold the lead. So hopefully Nafisa gets back, and can be healthy for the playoffs because, Minnesota's obviously looking to repeat this year, win and get back to the championship. They're looking to get that championship though. Courtney Williams, she'll hold it down. I'm not nervous or shook up about what's going to happen for them. I think they'll be fine without Nafisa. They've been stellar all season. However, she is a big part of their engine, and so hopefully she can get back soon. There's been some other WNBA news, which is not really what I want to necessarily talk about, but I do want to give my 2 cents in the sense that I think I'll say this. Throwing anything on the court at any sporting event, field, rink, grass, like whatever is it should be, you should be dealt with accordingly. And I heard that the fan that threw the object on the floor was arrested. The WNBA is saying they're facing, a minimum 1-year ban from the WNBA games. And I think you should ban a person for life for doing this. I mean, the first time it happened, it's something you see on the internet. You're going to laugh and chuckle and say, wow, this is crazy. What the hell? But it starts to become a trend and people want to be the next, viral moment. And one, there's a safety hazard with this. Two, it's disgusting. Like we've never seen this in the NBA. And for whatever reason, not to say I would like to see it, but like, why, you're doing this to a bunch of women, and I think it's childish and immature and quite frankly just weird activity. So I hope that trend does get dealt with, and I hope it stops because it's not really funny. And there is, like I said, underlying safety thing at the end of the day when you're throwing objects in the playing field or on the court. So I wanted to talk to Kev, but Kev's not here. I wanted to get his thoughts on SummerSlam. I didn't get a chance to indulge in SummerSlam. So, I mean, if you guys are watching, drop in the comments, what you think, how you like SummerSlam. If you went to SummerSlam, I know, shout out to Deej. Deej was at SummerSlam with Chris and a couple other Knicks Twitter folk that I know. It seemed like a fun event. I saw a couple highlights, couple clips. Jelly Roll was on there doing his thing and fought, is it Logan Paul, who did a 5-star frog splash off a ladder onto the announcer's table. That was a pretty epic moment. Seemed great. I heard John Cena had an amazing fight, one of the best of his career. So yeah, I'm looking forward to maybe seeing some highlights, maybe rewatching a match or two from SummerSlam and indulging that, maybe coming up this weekend, but we'll see. Football season is upon us, though. This is what I'm really, really excited for. What I really want to talk about today is the start of football season, where we're at, kind of a broad outlook on the NFL season. And if we could touch on some college football, I'd like to touch on some college football as well. But I guess starting off, we got the Hall of Fame game happened last week on Thursday. We'll have, week 1 of the preseason coming up this weekend. And it's just an exciting time. Shout out to the Hall of Fame class, guys like Jared Allen, Antonio Gates, Sterling Sharp, and we had one more, Eric Allen, cornerback from the Eagles. Eric Allen is actually not a guy that I grew up watching, wasn't necessarily a part of my generation. It's an older generation, but I saw he had over 50 interceptions career and played a healthy amount in this league. So shout out to him. Salute to Eric Allen for getting that Hall of Fame nod. But these guys, Jared Allen, Antonio Gates, and Sterling Sharp, even Sterling Sharp, I have to admit, was a little bit before my era. I kind of started watching football in that early 2000s, maybe 2001, 2000, probably like 2001-ish, 2002-ish seasons. And I remember Sterling Sharp and what he was able to do in Green Bay and him having like an injury-riddled career. But I didn't watch it to the furthest extent like a guy like Jared Allen or Antonio Gates. And so I just wanted to give light and credit to these 4 gentlemen for making the Hall of Fame. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to wear the gold jacket, as they say. So anytime guys that I grew up watching make the Hall of Fame, and even guys who came before them that kind of laid that foundation, it's something to talk about. It's something to rave about. I want to also shout out Antonio Gates for being the only NFL Hall of Famer to not play college football. Didn't play college football, made it to the Hall of Fame, tight end. He was a power forward in college basketball. So shout out to them, man. We did see Trey Lance ball out in that preseason game. Obviously, it's week 1. It's the first football we've gotten since February, so it's nothing to jump out of your seat for. However, Trey Lance in a new system with a new head coach who cares about his players, understands winning, and understands the, mental aspect of football. You gotta love a John Harbaugh or Jim Harbaugh. I believe it's Jim. He gives you that confidence and that belief. So Trey Lance went out there and dialed it up, had a great day, 3 touchdowns. I mean, he made that Detroit Lions second and third units, probably third and fourth more units look bad. But shout out. It was nice to see a former top 5, I think number 2 pick, if I'm not mistaken, overall, kind of getting some shine. So shout out to Trey Lance for that. Speaking of Trey, though, we're going to get into some more serious news, contract dispute, contract matter. This is always the talk of the town, weeks 1 through maybe 2, 3 of preseason, maybe even sometimes leading up to the regular season, week 1, where we saw a guy like Dak Prescott sign on the Sunday of the game, or like right before the game. CeeDee Lamb had his contract disputes. And I mentioned Trey Hendrickson because he has his, and he is still holding out of practicing with the Bengals. But I mentioned 2 Cowboys that have had contract disputes within the last few years. They're arguably two of the better players on the team. They're what makes the team go, being Dak Prescott as your quarterback and one of the best wide receivers in the league, CeeDee Lamb. Now you have another contract dispute with arguably the best defensive player, second best defensive player in the league, in Micah Parsons. You draft him out of Penn State, you find a gem, and he flourishes. 4 All-Pros. He's had an injury-riddled career to an extent, but he's laid it out on the line for the Cowboys. And I have nothing against Micah Parsons, the football player. All I could say personally, I don't know him, but the podcast and some of the things that I hear from the podcast out of his mouth, I don't necessarily agree with, and I sometimes shake my head, but it doesn't make him a bad person, and it certainly doesn't take away from what he is as a football player and what he brings to the Cowboys. So I'm just confused as to why Jerry Jones wants to always go this route with his players, but more specifically even his franchise players, cornerstone players, that eventually you're going to have to pay if you want them to play for you. And eventually he does typically pay the players. However, we see that he likes to be difficult, and it's very confusing at this point with Micah Parsons' situation, being as though as good of a player he is and as easy as it is to open a checkbook and say, here, be the premier pass rusher of the league, you'll get paid like it and you'll play like it. Jerry Jones, he has a way about him and the way he does business where I don't know if it's an ego thing, but it's very questionable. And so the Cowboys are in this situation right now. He's requested a trade since. Trey Hendrickson, like I mentioned, another premier pass rusher with the Bengals over the last 2 seasons or so, is leading the league in sacks. And it's just another one of those like head-scratching general manager front office questions where you're like, why are we hesitant to sign this guy long-term when we've seen the production over the last 3 to 4 years? It's been consistent. He's been healthy. And he's just coming into another contract year where he deserves his pay. And now guys are looking at each other with long faces. We've seen this defense in Cincinnati with Trey Hendrickson. We've seen it without him. And even with him, they've got holes to cover. They've got some things defensive backs-wise to figure out, and coverage-wise, they got to get going. New defensive coordinator over there. So it's not like you sign Trey Hendrickson and your defense is just going to be a top 5 defense in the league. However, the reason your defense would ever be a top 5 defense is because of a guy like Trey Hendrickson. It starts on the line of scrimmage, especially guys being able to get to the quarterback. So that's the second questionable general manager front office decision. And the third one is All-Pro wide receiver Terry McLaurin out of Washington with the Commanders. They just had a worst to first season. We saw the production over the past 5 years or so with Terry McLaurin since he's come in the league. He's 29 going on 30, still young, still fresh, and clearly can show that he still is at the top of his game, if not even still getting better at this point in his career. He's number 1 in contested catch rate. You have a quarterback in Jaden Daniels, who you want to have some congruency with going into year 2. You don't want him to have to find a new favorite target. He's got his number 1 receiver. And they just got Deebo Samuel. So I understand that you can't afford everybody and something's going to have to give at one point. But if someone deserves to get paid on this Commanders team for what they've done and laid out for the last few years during their career, with whatever quarterback you guys decided to trot out there under whatever head coach was under the helm at the time, I think Terry McLaurin has been nothing but a standout player and a all-pro receiver. So, again, questionable decision making by the general manager and front office. Moving along, I want to talk about the playoffs this year, who I see getting in the playoffs that didn't get in the playoffs last season, right? Before we get into who I think is going to win each division, I'll run through that in my quickness. But I think in the AFC, it's tough because I have 2 teams, the Bengals and the Dolphins. Those are my 2 playoff teams from for this year that didn't make the playoffs last year. And I don't think both of them will make it. I know if EP was here, he would be shunning me. He would be looking at me crazy for even mentioning the Bengals. And I'm thinking I'm a little crazy as well because, again, they have this contract dispute with Trey Hendrickson, as I mentioned. And also, their defense just doesn't sell me on a playoff type of defense. They started to find their rhythm and their groove toward the end of the season. They had a couple questionable losses throughout the season where they could have maybe won those games, like versus the Ravens in that overtime game. Great team, great game, great competition. Joe Burrow was at the top of his game. And then versus the Chiefs as well, where they get a pass interference on third down that kind of gave the Chiefs the game to keep their undefeated season alive. And so you kind of take away things like that, and we're looking at them in a better light. So I do like the Bengals to possibly make the playoffs, but I'm not going to give them the nod. I'm going to go with the Dolphins. I just think that the Dolphins at this point, something has to give with the offense you guys are running. You guys got the speedsters in Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Devon Achane. Mike McDaniel is going to have to figure things out offensively with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. I mean, he's amazing. He's as accurate as they come. He doesn't make too many mistakes. As long as he can stay healthy, which has been his crutch, I think the Dolphins are in good shape to be able to make the playoffs in a division that's essentially winnable. The Bills are the cream of the crop of that division. However, you know, it's hard to stay at the top consistently year after year when you have other teams in the division that are also doing what they got to do, you know. So I think the Dolphins have had a good offseason. I think the Dolphins have drafted fairly well over the past few years, and I would even say more than fairly well. Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, this is what I'm excited to see because, you know, they just traded Jonnu Smith. They just traded back from Minkah Fitzpatrick. They're going to have some guys on that defense that, you know, are sound and ready to compete. So, you know, I'm definitely excited for Miami. And I do think they'll come out of the AFC this year. Well, not come out of the AFC, but make the AFC playoffs this year. On the NFC side, man, this one's tough. I have two teams as well here, and they're both birds. It's the Falcons and the Seahawks. And, you know, a part of me thinks the Seahawks can, and they have the roster to do it. They have good enough talent to get to the playoffs. That division is it's up in the air. It's definitely up in the air, you know, with 49ers losing out on a couple key players. The Cardinals, you know, they started to play really well late in the season, and we're going to see if that's going to be sustainable for another 17 straight games. But they're also in the Rams division, and I think that's the Rams division to lose. The Falcons is the other team I said, and they're in a winnable division to an extent. You know, you guys are going to have to play. New Orleans should be a breeze, and the Panthers should be a breeze. However, that division is Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay's division, if you ask me. I think Baker Mayfield is going to light it up, and they'll probably be a top 3 team in the NFC this year. But I think the Falcons can make a wild card. You got guys like Bijan Robinson. Drake London's coming into his own. I know Michael Penix is going to look for him a lot. I know he's going to look to Kyle Pitts, and Kyle Pitts hasn't necessarily proven himself or been what we thought he'd be being drafted at number 4. But with time, things get better. You know, with new system, new quarterback. I hear that their offensive coordinator is trying to sort of mimic the offensive playbook that Michael Penix was running at Washington. That'll get him more comfortable, more acclimated, and I guess when you think about it, you know, he was willing to throw that ball and put the ball in the air. So if he comes in with that same type of confidence he had leading, you know, a drive in the national championship game in college football, yeah, I think Michael Penix and the Falcons can absolutely make the playoffs in his first year as a starter full time, which is a big take. You know, I'm not saying they're gonna do it, but I think from the teams that I looked at that didn't make the playoffs last year versus the teams that did make the, or excuse me, not did make the playoffs, but the teams that didn't make the playoffs last year, I think out of that pool, I like the Falcons in the NFC. So we'll leave it there. I got some questions from some listeners. Shout out to my listeners. Shout out to, the ATS pod listeners. We appreciate you guys. And they sent in some questions. I want to get through these real quick. Division winners. So they want to know who I think is going to win each division. If I'll just run through this real quick, I'll go AFC East. I do think the Bills will win that division again. AFC West is up in the air. I mean, the Chargers look very, very good through training camp and what we saw, on Thursday night last week. I'm still going to go, and the Raiders. I do want to mention the Raiders, having Pete Carroll, having Geno Smith, drafting Ashton Genty. It's exciting. I don't think they're there just yet, though. And Patrick Mahomes hasn't shown me why he would lose that division. So, Chiefs, AFC West. AFC North, I got to go Baltimore Ravens, man. This is one of the most talented teams that we've seen from Ravens franchise history on paper. And what we saw Lamar do the last few years and only get better with time, it brings me no doubt that he's going to be way better this year, continue to get better. And the weapons he has, man, it's exciting. So I got the Ravens in the AFC North. And then in the AFC South, oh man, AFC South, Houston is the favorite, obviously. It's too early as a Colts fan to even say we can, because I don't know who the starting quarterback of this team is, so I don't want to go with, the team that doesn't have a starter just yet versus the team that has won the division previously and has their quarterback of the future. I'm going to go with the Texans here, and that hurts. That can change by week 8. And even maybe sooner, but I do think the Colts make a wild card. That's one of my wild takes. I think about the Colts in that way. And then in the NFC West, that's the division we were just talking about where, the Seahawks, it's going to be tough for them. I got the Rams. Give me Stafford. Give me Devontae Adams. Give me Kyron Williams and Jared Verse on that defense. Sean McVay's going to dial it up all year. NFC East, Eagles going back-to-back in that division. They might even come back out of the NFC. And I'm not slouching on the Commanders. I do think that they're serious. I don't know that Jaden Daniels is going to have that sophomore slump. He looks ready to go. I seen some throws he made in camp. Wow. But the Eagles, man, it's too much punch there. It's too much punch. And they keep drafting dogs, literally. And a Bama boy this year out of is a Jahad Campbell. Shout out to Jahad Campbell. NFC South, Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Bucks definitely taking that division. And then the NFC North, this one is if J.J. McCarthy could come out and be what Sam Darnold was, or even just a tad better, I think they could win that division. But I think that NFC North for the foreseeable future is going to run through Detroit and those Lions. So those are my division winners. I actually talked about the non-playoff teams. That was a question, actually. So I already talked about the playoff teams that didn't make it, or teams that didn't make the playoffs, who I think they'll be is the Dolphins in the AFC and the Falcons in the NFC. And okay, so EP, shout out to EP. He wanted to know what I think about this. And this goes into the other question, because the first question is, who is your dark horse or unexpected team to make some noise? And then EP said, 9 out of the 10 last seasons, we've seen a team go from worst to first. Commanders did it last year. Who does it this year? I don't know. So who were the worst teams in the league last year? I know the Raiders were up there. I know the Jaguars were up there. I know the Browns were up there. I know the Titans were up there. Man, that's tough, EP. You put me on the spot right here. Let me see this. Hold on. And the Panthers. This is, because if you would have asked me this last year, with Jaden Daniels being drafted, that's exciting, right? But that's how I feel about the Titans with Cam Ward. And if we talked about his Madden rating, I'll sit here and be mad all day because 75 is egregious for the number one overall quarterback in the NFL draft. Should have at least gotten a 76, a 78, 79. But we'll see him prove himself. All right, looking at this list here, Titans, we're going to go top 6 of the draft. Titans, Jaguars, Giants, Patriots, Browns. And as I look at all these teams, I'll be honest, if we could get above average play. All right, so whatever Russell Wilson did last year, if he can play just a little better than that, I think we're looking at a serious wild card contender with the New York Giants. I do. And I can't read comments, guys. I'm sorry if you guys are commenting. Shout out to y'all. We're about to wrap this up in just a moment here. I will get to, if there were any other questions, get to those next show. But I do think the Giants, if Russell Wilson, like I said, can play a bit better than he did last year with Malik Neighbors staying healthy all season, with the defense they've been able to put together the last few seasons, guys like Xavier McKinney, drafting a guy like Abdul Carter, it can get there. It can get there, and they're gonna have to rack up some division wins for the ones that count, but they're also just gonna have to beat all the NFC teams as much as they can. And I can see the Giants sneaking into a wild card spot. That's who the dark horse would be. It's not saying like this is what my favorable answer or thought and opinion is, but if you had to ask me worst to first, I think out of those teams, the Giants would have the best chance in my opinion. So before we get out of here, I guess that's it for my NFL talk. I'll wrap that up. I did want to mention that the Miami Hurricanes came in today as the number 10 ranked team in the nation. Number 10 ranked team in the nation. That's their highest rank in the coaches poll since 2018. Obviously, after that disappointing 2017 season, the fun lasted, but it was so fast. Very disappointing. Much like last season's did as well, where it was fun until it wasn't, and the cardiac was arrested. I think it's a little high, if you ask me. And hey, I'm glad we're top 10, like, coaches poll, great. But I hope that nobody gets a, high head off this. I hope nobody, plays arrogant like they're top 10, because right now we got to prove it. I want to see us demolish teams on the schedule that we should and beat the good teams as we should as well. This team should not lose more than 3 games this season. I want to say 2. I want to say 1, but I'm going to give grace. And so if we're serious, we don't lose more than 1 game. If we're top 10 for real, we should run the table. And that's just how I feel. But I'll believe that when I see it, because it hasn't happened in a while since I've been a UM fan. I don't have enough time to go over the conference champions for the college football season or the Heisman Trophy, but I will say Jeremiah Smith is definitely in that conversation in my top 3. I'll finish that next week, where I'll talk about the Heisman candidates, or who I think will win the Heisman, and also all my conference champions. So I do want to end the show with shout out to the Red Sox. We've been playing good baseball. I hope to keep that going. Just listen to this power rankings. It's August 4th. Milwaukee Brewers, Chicago Cubs, Toronto Blue Jays, Detroit Tigers, Los Angeles Dodgers. Cubs, Blue Jays, Tigers, 2 through 4. We haven't heard those names this high in a while. Baseball is back in a great place. There's parity. We love to see all the young talent. And the Yankees were swept by the Marlins. That's telling us about where baseball is right now. Shout out to y'all for listening. This has been a great episode of the All Things Sports Podcast. I'll probably see you guys later this week, if not at the top of next week. Subscribe on YouTube, All Things Sports Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at ATS Pod, and on Instagram at ATS Pod Official. Again, thank you for listening, taking the time out your day with me. You feel me? Shout out to y'all.